Welcome back to Common Sense, Ohio. God, it's the end of September already.
Oh, man.
Wow. This is flying by. Norman's back from doing his thing, and Steve is out doing his thing. I'm Brett. And we are still reeling from, the post Charlie Kirk murder. Lots of stuff that happened during, Norm's exit of the show or his non-appearance on the show. He was busy in this, but we definitely wanted to have Norm be able to voice his look at what has transpired. I mean, obviously, a lot of things have happened since you've been gone, and at the same time, the memorial service, more investigation, more details have come out on who this young man was that basically murdered Charlie Kirk. But I want to give you the floor in regards to saying your piece. I think
Sure.
it's healthy to talk about it. That's what we do here.
Yeah, so my particular take on Charlie Kirk is I had, some disagreements with what he said, but probably 95% agreement. I'm not in favor of using military terms to describe our social conflict amongst the American people. Charlie and many other conservatives use language like war. We're having a moral war or a war for values, or we're at war with the other side, things like that. And he would sometimes talk about meeting liberals who do things like stuff ballot boxes or whatever tricks during the election. And he would say things like, well, if they're going to do it, we should do it too. And that came from the emotional side of him. And that would be about the 5% that I stylistically disagree with. And so he was speaking metaphorically. He was speaking sometimes off the cuff. And I'm mainly talking about his radio show. So I didn't read much of his. I didn't go to his college debates. But just like Steven Crowder and other people who have done those kind of, tent things on campus where, prove me wrong kind of thing, put up a little sign and say, show me I'm wrong. I think those are terrific vehicles, especially on a college campus. And those kinds of interchanges in a hall or out on the quad or wherever on a college campus kind of blow up the idea of a safe space. And I think that's appropriate. I don't think colleges should have, debate-free areas except during class itself, unless the professor says, "Hey, let's have a debate."
Right.
And then it's
the focus of the class. Exactly. Sure.
Then that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and debate, some point of history, or let's debate whether James Joyce, something about his book, and we don't think that somebody says, "Oh no, that wasn't the theme of his book," or whatever. But I think on a college campus, at least as it was when I attended college, people were debating great things, huge issues, gigantic social actions, things like the Vietnam War, things like the draft, things like Gerald Ford's pardon of Richard Nixon, things like Gerald Ford's pardon of draft dodgers. On campus, people debated very serious issues, things like Kent State, what happened. And I traveled to Kent State, and we had a very incredible debate, an incredible presentation by some of the survivors and witnesses of that event. And people were allowed to ask questions and posit different theories. And they would be discussed, and some were proven to be wrong, and some were proven to be good possibilities. And this is the way we all learn. It's a way that really our country is founded on the free exchange of information. After all, our Bill of Rights starts with the First Amendment, and it guarantees the right of free speech. And Charlie Kirk certainly is an icon of free speech, just like Malcolm X would be, just like Martin Luther King would be. And of course, both of those men were also assassinated. And it just goes to show you that the pen or speech is mightier than the sword, because long after Malcolm X was killed, long after Martin Luther King was killed, and JFK and Abraham Lincoln and Charlie Kirk, it will be shown that their works, their memories, the iconic beliefs that they stood up for, because after all, Lincoln and King and Malcolm X weren't perfect either, but no human being is, but the main things that they stood for will live on and have lived on well past their lifetimes, and are almost, if you view them as martyrs, as many of us do, certainly Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King and now Charlie Kirk and many, many other examples can be viewed as martyrs. And those ideas will live on. I think it's telling, Brett, that in the aftermath of that assassination 2 weeks ago, Turning Point claims, and I have no reason to disbelieve them, but an incredible figure of 18,000 requests have been made on their 1-800 line, or however you get a hold of them, to start chapters in high schools and colleges. 18,000 requests. And so that event that they had in State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona on Sunday, many of us watched all or some of that, and I would say it was, as Trump indicated, President Trump, that it felt like a revival tent meeting, more of a religious kind of event than anything else. So I would just say that in the aftermath of this, where things being written on the bullet casings and the accused assassin's emails and his phone calls and things between himself and his romantic interest and his family and his followers on Facebook, all of that stuff, I hope people will allow the authorities in Utah, who are mainly doing the investigation, with some FBI support, because it is a state crime. It's a murder in the state of Utah, and the state of Utah has primary jurisdiction. There may be some federal crime charged later on, but seems to me it might be sort of duplicative if Utah has a death penalty, and if he's found guilty after a fair and free trial to have committed this murder, and he gets a death penalty, I guess I don't know what the federal prosecution, like what purpose it would serve, but it may happen. At any rate, I would ask people, and I'm doing this myself, to not jump to any kind of conclusion until the investigation is finished. And why do I say that? Because just yesterday, Trump's would-be assassin, Ryan Ruth, who was being prosecuted in Florida for his attempted assassination of Trump at the golf course down there, Mar-a-Lago, that evidence was communicated to a jury of his peers. They found him guilty on all 5 counts. And that is an open trial. All the evidence is there for all of us to see. And it will be the same in this case in Utah. And I hope people don't accuse whole communities of other people of this crime. It was committed, so far as we know, not a conspiracy at this point, but by a single individual. And let the FBI, let the state of Utah conclude their investigation. Let them bring, he has been charged by some crimes already, of some crimes. Let that happen. Let the evidence roll out at trial. And then we'll all see what his exact motives were, what his belief system was, if that's relevant, and let the process work. And I say that as somebody who does believe in the death penalty, and not everybody on this show does, and that's okay. We debated that here too. Those are my thoughts at this point.
No, I agree. And Steve had mentioned too that he was really impressed with what the DA had stated at the very beginning of, it's going to be a slow process and very detailed process, because they don't want this to not come to its end where it should come to. Do it right, do it slowly, get it done, and everybody should be happy. There's not going to be an overturning because they messed up a step and the guy goes free if he truly guilty. So no, I think we just have to be patient and not push the process. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen correctly. Allow it to happen. Let's put it that way. So,
and our good friend Steve, who could not be here today because he's practicing his profession, would say, and I'll say it for all three of us, that our Constitution calls for a vigorous defense, even for the people who appear to be, case cold, case closed, proven, in our minds that they're guilty, even with seemingly irrefutable video evidence or, whatever other kind of evidence is presented, and we think, it's obvious, that John Wilkes Booth killed Abraham Lincoln because he jumped from the balcony, landed on the stage, and said basically "down with tyrants" in Latin, and then made off and escaped. So we would still say, if we're accurate journalists and we're responsibly representing the Constitution, that he is an alleged assassin until proven guilty, and that's the way it goes. That's our system, and so. Yes, sometimes very detestable people accused of rape, murder, child molestation, whatever it might be, are entitled to a vigorous defense. And why? So that when the punishment comes down on their head, we are all satisfied that they received a fair trial.
Right.
And that's the point.
Yeah.
And that's that. So no trial was given to Charlie Kirk. He was just killed. But our society is better than that. We give his would-be assassin all the benefits of the Constitution, and that's what makes us right, and that's what makes him wrong.
Right, and the system will work. We just have to give it time.
That's right.
It will work. It will work for sure. Yeah, exactly. On a national scale, Russia continues to kind of, with NATO nations, I don't know what's.
It's unbelievable.
I don't know what's in their head. What are they thinking?
It's unbelievable. These incursions by drones and MiG-31 aircraft into countries like Estonia, Poland. I mean, it was the USSR that carved Poland in half with Hitler and the non-aggression treaty between the USSR and Hitler, and they took half of Poland during World War II, meaning the Russian army, the former Soviet Union, the USSR. So when you fly jets or drones over Polish people today, well, there's still people alive,
True.
who saw that movie one other time in their lives. Mm-hmm. And this is super dangerous stuff. This is really dancing on the head of a pin here.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of room on the head of a pin to dance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, Article 5 of NATO's charter says, an attack on one member of NATO is an attack on all members of NATO. Now, is an incursion into the airspace of another country an attack? Okay, it could be an accident, putatively. It could be a testing, some kind of radar, and to just see what NATO nations do in response. Well, what NATO did, right, was dispatch fighter jets of its own to chase Russian planes back across the border. And we saw what happened in Turkey several years ago. Turkey's a member of NATO, where Turkey shot down a Russian jet fighter that had gone into Turkish airspace. And, think of what that could have triggered had the Russians decided, oh, wait a minute, we dispute that. You shot our plane down in Russian airspace, and we get into a dispute about where the incident really happened. Mm-hmm. And before you know it, somebody's pushing nuclear buttons. This is not good. This is really dumb of Vladimir Putin. This is super dangerous stuff to be testing NATO's answer to this, and to put NATO pilots up in the air, armed, ready to reply in kind to any kind of Russian incursion. Super dangerous, super irresponsible, especially when there's a hot war between Ukraine and Russia at this time. And we're looking at a possible expansion of that. Not good.
No, it's not. Well, exactly. Your example. That's what ran in my mind too. Is like, oh, is he just kind of poking the bear, kind of see how far it can go, but as well as, we now do know. I mean, drones are kind of the go-to for any engagement. So you don't know what those drones are. They may not be necessarily be spy drones. They could be armed, ready to blow up.
100%.
So it's not just playing around here. It's that, okay, you got to take drones seriously.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, and what kind of response or what else are they going to be trying to do? Is this it? Is it that's all they're done playing? Trying to figure that in regards to pushing the envelope, or is he going to start putting drones in other spaces he's not supposed to be going? Just to see the reaction.
His behavior,
almost like he's trying to pull in and trying to start another world war almost.
His behavior has been incredibly, tone deaf and reckless.
Yeah.
And just, what was it, a month ago? Basically, all the heads of state from Western Europe flew into D.C. and had a convocation to decide what the next steps were going to be in trying to settle the Ukraine-Russian war. And what did Putin do the next day after he got home from meeting with Trump in Alaska and having this, and then the Western nations having this big meeting before that on how Trump would negotiate? The very next day when he got home, he did one of the largest drone attacks that Russia has done in this war on the city of Kyiv, right?
Yeah.
And killed a bunch of innocent civilians. They weren't even military targets. And you just wonder, this guy is not sincere. Clearly. And then, yesterday Zelensky and Trump had an excellent meeting of the minds, and Trump said all kinds of high praise for the people of Ukraine and the resistance. And I am sensing that the administration is, they gave him a good 6 months after Trump came into office to work something out, and I think he's done. He talked yesterday about lowering the boom, very serious, like debanking Russia from the world bank system, very serious kinds of things that will further shut down their economy.
Right.
And then how Putin reacts to that, he may view that as an act of war. We don't know. How do you handle this guy short of going to war? Is a question.
And you hope that the Russian population see it for what it's worth and do some uprising. I don't know. Maybe it has to come from internal.
Yeah.
That we have some help there. I've not heard anything to that effect, but there isn't much news that comes out of Russia to know what's going on.
Well, in the past,
so
the Russian army in the past has deposed Russian premiers. Now, that was in the Soviet Union, right?
Yeah.
Like Khrushchev was brought down by internal military and Politburo people who disagreed with his handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's not unheard of for a military junta, so to speak, a temporary coup of the civilian authority in the Soviet Union, now Russia, to have occurred. And I really hope it does happen.
I know.
I'd love to see 2 or 3 admirals, a couple generals, and their staff walk into Putin's office with pistols drawn and say, "Sir,
enough.
Time is up. You're going to get us all killed."
Right, and like you haven't already. What's the number of Russian soldiers that have been killed so far?
Something like 1 million. They estimate.
That's a stupid number.
It's a huge number in a country of, I think, 170 million people. So, I mean, 1 out of every 170 people in Russia has died fighting Ukraine. I mean,
and gained absolutely nothing. And what are they really gaining in the long run to
Yeah.
a certain degree, other than pride, possibly? I don't know.
and I'm not even sure the
even-
people in Russia, like,
right.
I mean, so much of
Exactly.
Ukraine is ethnic Russian that those are their brothers and sisters.
Kind of a Civil War North-South kind of feel here. You're kind of
That's right.
killing your own
That's right.
kin.
Right.
To a certain degree,
Right.
2 or 3 times removed. But yeah, there's a close familial relationship between those two countries,
That's right.
the civilians.
Yeah.
I just
A huge mess.
hope to God by the end of the year this thing gets figured out.
Yeah.
It's got to be done because, Ukraine is in a mess. To rebuild, I can't even imagine.
Right.
Just the photos that we see in the film, in the video that we see, what it's going to take to rebuild Ukraine.
It's crazy that some of the targets, like Putin has dropped bombs on active nuclear power plants in the Ukraine, right? So just imagine that. Like if you blew the containment cell open, think of all of the radiation poisoning that would come out of these active nuclear power plants. I mean, it's senseless.
That is scorched earth. That is scorched earth, basically, because you can't even if they were to win the country, it's worthless. That area that he just bombed, if it were to that end.
And the cloud would probably somewhat fly over Russia.
Probably so.
So it's like the whole thing is it's like a madman.
Insane.
He's flailing.
Yeah.
And it seems like we're dealing with an irrational person.
Yeah.
It's like Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's whacked out on that level.
Right, exactly. That I tried this. It's like he has this list of 20 things to try, and he's down to number 18 or 19. Is like we got to be done with this. I mean, we have to get something done. And I don't mean it as a knee-jerk thing. It's just if we have things in play, actions in play that can get this to stop, let's start really pushing those economically,
right.
or if it's an uprising per se, let's support it,
right?
So it stops. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of like when they arrested Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin got up on the tank and turned the tanks around, in Red Square and said, "You're not going to fire on the civilian population. Come on, you're a Russian soldier in the Russian army, and you're not going to turn your guns on the Russian people. You need to disobey your orders." And then Yeltsin became prime minister or premier, or whatever, to replace Gorbachev, and Gorbachev was freed. So there's an example where the Russian people rose up against the powers that be, and we're able to push back. And I think, Brett, the best solution would be if it came internally.
Would be,
and that's, That's going to be hard
Yeah.
because we have a KGB guy running Russia right now, and he has systematically killed off the dissenting population.
Mm-hmm.
So where those people will come from, I'm thinking it's going to have to be military people who look basically at the survival of their own military branches. Yeah. That's what's at stake.
And understand the mechanism of how to, just in a heartbeat, it stops.
That's right.
They know the inner workings versus a non-military civilian not knowing how it really works. You're right. That's going to be the most efficient. And
they're the only ones with guns.
It's literally turning the guns the other direction. Yeah, turning them away from the Ukraine. In that feel to it. Yeah. Coming back home, if you were a Jimmy Kimmel fan, you got him back. If you're not a Jimmy Kimmel fan, you got him back. Interesting, play over a week's time of and a lot of different layers to it. I mean, there was a focus of the economics of his show. It was the focus of his statements on the show that got him suspended for a week or so. But an interesting play all the way around. I don't know who necessarily are the winners or losers to this, but it's kind of come back round full circle. He's back, not necessarily on all stations, but he is again a show host.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I don't think the guy's that funny. When they had the Man Show with Adam Carolla, that was a super funny show. It was totally immature. It was totally, sophomoric and frat boy humor. And, on that show, Jimmy, he wore blackface in a couple skits. He talked constantly about women as objects. And that was kind of the point of the show, was bad taste. Yeah. And certainly him and Adam Carolla exercised that to the full extent. And it was, at moments kind of funny. And then he got on TV and he was okay the first season or two. But then, I don't know. To me, he and Colbert, in particular, those two, and there's others, that John guy from England or whatever wherever he's from. Those guys just weren't funny. I mean, it was just to me, it was like an hour of they're just raging against Trump. And even during the 4 years Trump was gone, Kimmel would just go on like his Trump jokes every night. And so to me, now I'm just viewing this as a network executive. Right. To me, why would you, if you're running a network, unlike, say, Jack Parr, Johnny Carson days, right, where you have, if you're going to have political humor, it's both sides, right? Jay Leno, both sides. Like, make fun of Jimmy Carter, make fun of Gerald Ford, make fun of Nixon, make fun of Reagan, make fun of, Obama, et cetera, et cetera. Just it's a free-for-all and just have fun on both sides. Mm-hmm. Instead, these guys would go on and on and on like it was a partisan comedy show. And so I would say, as a network executive, why are we pissing off half of our customer base? I just don't understand that. And so I would say two things. As a business decision, Bob Iger and Disney, they can do whatever the heck they want to do. Oh, yeah. It's your company. You run it. You decide if you want to turn it into or continue to operate it as a DNC comedy platform or as a platform for making statements about policy, and you want to attack Trump every night. That's okay. Free speech, as I said before, First Amendment. I would say number two, the FCC chairman should not have made any kind of comments whatsoever about ABC's executive decision to pull this guy, even for 2 or 3 days. It just is not the FCC's role, in my opinion, to discuss the content other than something like, straight up pornography, something like that. But otherwise, on broadcast TV, not your business to discuss what people think is funny or what the comedy is or whatever. That's not a government process, and it shouldn't be. And he shouldn't have even gotten into the subject, I would have advised him not to say anything and just decide things like mergers, acquisitions.
And the part of
stay in your lane.
Right. The part of the renewal process is that group does not come out and dictate because somebody said something that the license is not going to be renewed, or, we can do it the easy way, we can do it the hard way. Okay, that scenario. That's not the way this plays out. What plays out is we, citizens who don't like something that's being said, file with the FCC, and when it's time for those stations to be renewed, or it could be action prior, could be if it's a heinous, that license is taken away. That's how it works. Our voices say what comes off or on, or a license is not renewed. Now, that is kind of watered down anymore just because we have a tremendous amount of streaming. And it's non-licensed. So really, you're not kicking any voice to the curb. They can just find another channel to say what they want to say. This is not the 1970s and 80s. Once we had the internet play in, and also satellite TV, that sort of thing, there are diversions of where this this voice can be. But I totally agree that with I've over 35 years in broadcast radio prior to me moving into podcast consulting. It bothered me him coming out and saying that. It's like, that is not where the FCC needs to be playing. That is not your sandbox. That is not your role, and you needed to not be on that show. I mean, that was the sole purpose of being on that show, was to say that. Bottom line, you knew that question was going to be asked. The FCC, the head of the FCC does not do talk shows unless there is something to be talked about, because it's pretty much a boring commission. It's regulations. It's a very boring role, quite frankly. But it's not on the aggressive. It's usually on the other end of it, of taking care of problems when they arise.
Yeah, I would just say this is an adjunct point. So having criticized the head of the FCC for weighing in, even with he shouldn't have said anything. And even if you want to view his comment in the most charitable way, right, where he could say, well, by hard way, I meant XYZ, not ABC.
Right, yeah.
Whatever. He just shouldn't have said anything.
Right.
So, but an adjunct point is, and this is the part that I find pretty incredible over at on the traditional legacy media, is they seem incredibly curious and incredibly, let's run to the ramparts over what the FCC guy said. And that's fine. That's totally fine. But where were they when government sponsored and government paid for actual censorship and deplatforming was happening under the prior administration? Where were the calls for people like Dr. McCulloch, Dr. McCary, people like, Glenn Beck, or even the detestable Alex Jones? Where were the calls for their free speech to be respected? And instead, the FBI under Biden, with our tax dollars paying for the FBI, going to Silicon Valley and threatening them with Article 230, we're going to pull that protection from you unless you deplatform and decontent things on YouTube and Wikipedia and Google results. And frankly, it has happened to this show. It happened under Biden, and it still happens to this show now and then with Google, where we are shadow banned because some of our content right here on Common Sense Ohio does not comport to what Google thinks is acceptable. Now, Google's a private company. They can run that company any way they want, okay? But where is the concern? If you're concerned about what ABC is deciding as a private company vis-a-vis Jimmy Kimmel, where is the same concern about what other private companies have done to throttle and stick a cork in our views, meaning not necessarily everybody here at the table, but some of us. and some of the other people during the prior administration when actual tax dollars were used to shut people down. So I would just say to, Stephanopoulos and the people, on these Sunday shows, hey, guys, you can't have it both ways. If you're going to be a free speecher, which is what I am, right, I will come to the defense, right, of Jimmy Kimmel, like Ted Cruz did, like Rand Paul did, and say ABC has a right to make these decisions, but the government does not. And I would say the same thing about deplatforming people and threatening YouTube and Google to take content down that the other administration and the other party disagree with.
Well, once you start
fair is fair,
right? When you start labeling and taking away those rights, you all of a sudden create this forbidden fruit that they become even more popular. To a certain degree, and you run it underground or whatever.
That's right.
So it doesn't serve its purpose. And I think a good example is when records, CDs at the time, and albums started to be labeled with an E.
Right.
Through Tipper Gore's push to label albums that had swear words in it or content that would, a young adult parents should be aware of, and young adults probably shouldn't. Well, it made those albums even more popular. Now you still see E's on things, and you don't even see it. You don't even see the E. I see it occasionally because I notice oh, there's a swear word in that song. I didn't know that, sort of thing.
Well, even more
so it doesn't
than that,
do anything. Yeah.
Even more than that, I'd love to blame the Democratic Party for that, but I can't. What Tipper Gore did was bipartisan. She had as much support from Republicans as she did from Democrats. And listen, I understand her point. I just don't think any laws were called for.
Right.
For example, when you talk about assassinating police officers on an NWA album, right? And it's more than just cuss words, right?
Yeah.
They were talking about raping women. They were talking about assassinating police officers. They were talking about doing violence, et cetera, gang violence on those albums. Now, hey, they got the right to do it. Just like the Ku Klux Klan has the right to march around and say they hate Jews and blacks. And just like Jews and blacks, if they want, can march around and say they hate the Ku Klux Klan. As Ted Cruz has said accurately, hate speech is protected speech because there is no consistent definition of what hate is. That's the problem. Who gets to decide what hate is, right? If I want to criticize the Pope of the Catholic Church, some people would say, well, any criticism of the Pope is hate speech. Well, it certainly is not hate speech to criticize the Pope. But you could see where some people would make that conclusion. Other people would say, oh, if you criticize Benjamin Netanyahu in his prosecution of Hamas, then you must hate Israel and you must hate all Jewish people. Well, that's likewise ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
So you don't get to define hate. And so we just, in this country, short of violence and short of like creating a predicate to violence, like yelling fire in a crowded theater, right, where it's calculated to result in violence. Short of that, people should be allowed to say whatever kind of sick, ugly, horrible, despotic thing that they want to say, because as Brett just pointed out, that gets it out in the open, and then the rest of us can condemn that. The rest of us can say, well, when you say that you hate Jews and blacks, you are a frickin' idiot. You are the worst kind of human being, and we get to condemn that. But if you make them bottle that up, it becomes attractive to a certain uneducated, isolated group of people. And that's how the skinhead movement got started in Germany, because they suppressed any talk of the Third Reich and Hitler. So that made it attractive to young German men and young British men also. And the whole skinhead phenomenon started back in the 80s. And that's why, because you suppressed an open debate about Nazism. And that was a mistake.
Yeah, it is. And I think back to your point, I think you make a really good point that we don't want to hear it because it is disgusting.
It is disgusting.
But it has to be out there. And we can choose to listen, or we can choose to at least take note of it, but we don't have to repeat it. We don't have to
That's right.
share it. Yeah, or you know,
right.
that it is just I would rather it be out there and let it be for what it's worth. We talk about it. It will hold its own value because it's valueless.
That's right.
Honestly, it really is.
That's right.
And it won't go anywhere. But if we push it underground, it will go somewhere. And that's a hard decision to make. That's really hard to do. That's not our way of handling things. We want to we don't want our kids to be exposed to it. We don't want to have ourselves exposed to this over and over and over again. So we want to shelf it. We want to put it in a locked box, but that's not the way to do it.
It's not the way to do it.
Yeah.
And that's not our system. That's not what America is. And, I think, again, reflecting back on our earlier conversation about Charlie Kirk, you're not going to kill off an idea by killing off the guy who had the idea.
No.
So, if you think suppressing Mein Kampf, which is what they did in Germany, not letting it be read by college students, not understanding the roots of Nazism, and not having that debate in Germany, it just created a complete misunderstanding of their own history, and that attractiveness of the forbidden is very strong with young people because they're trying to figure out, well, why do my parents and grandparents not want me to know about this?
Yeah.
There must be something really important about it. And then it becomes attractive in a weird sense to an immature mind or to a weak mind. It becomes something that's glamorous even. And evil can be glamorous.
Oh, for sure.
That's one of the ways that the devil, if you believe in the devil, if you believe in Lucifer, that's one of the ways that he draws people in, is making sin and making evil attractive.
Right. Exactly. You brought up this to talk about this, and I saw this as well, too. We're going to go on to more of a local feel here, at least in Columbus, Ohio, but I'm sure this idea is not unique around the country, is an entertainment tax in a portion of Columbus, the short north specifically.
Yeah. This is the first time it's been done in Ohio, but I could see the Cleveland Flats area doing this. Yeah. I could see the Cincinnati over the Rhine doing this.
Sure.
And so what we're talking about is the city council created a zone in it's a convention area of Columbus, Ohio, called the Short North, which is where the convention center is, and some of the arenas and stadiums and things downtown, are nearby, and some of the name restaurants, big, named restaurants are in this area. And what they did is they overlaid an extra tax, an extra sales tax on top of food, beverage, parking, anything, any economic activity taking place in that area that the city of Columbus has authority over, to provide extra security, to provide amenities, street lighting, beautification projects, other kinds of ways to dress up this party zone for conventioneers, to be paid for by anybody, not just conventioneers, but local residents of Franklin County that maybe want to go, see a hockey game and have a steak dinner at one of these restaurants downtown before or after the game, or have a few drinks. They will be paying this extra tax. And what a lot of citizens are asking is, well, wait a minute now. We already pay an income tax and property taxes for residents that live in the city of Columbus and Franklin County. And so we already are paying for a police department, and we're already paying for waterworks, and we're already paying our electric bill, and et cetera, et cetera. And so why, why when I go downtown and buy a steak dinner in this neighborhood, am I paying extra for extra police, right? Like the police should be just there anyway, right? So I don't know, Brett. I think it may backfire.
I think it probably will because, again, it's born on the back of retail and restaurants. They're the ones that are going to have to collect it.
Yes.
And
explain it.
And I'm sure the rent down there is not cheap for anybody to be through there anyway. No. So just another layer. And we just absorbed another tax increase here this year for, when you buy anything, it's now up to 6 3/4 or something. I don't know what stupid number it is. It's
different in every county, but it's going up.
But I understand they're trying to make it equal for everything that goes on. I get that. Okay, it's not a bed tax when you're at a hotel, or it's not specifically driven against the convention center where they're going to have to absorb it. But a lot of the income comes from that though too. So really, maybe it should be borne on conventioneers and conventions coming in. And again, that's not a great selling point to have a convention here. I get that.
No.
But
Dayton is just 45 minutes away.
A lot of the crime that comes from, I'm talking, human trafficking comes from the convention center itself because of what it brings. Not the type of people. I don't mean that, but it's that transient person that comes in for, that may not be the greatest term to call them, but a meaning is they're here for 5 days and then they're gone.
Right.
And that attracts human trafficking for certain things. I mean, there's a piece of that maybe we're weighing too much on this on us, Franklin County residents, Columbus residents, and it's one of those, maybe it should be more borne on the convention center of those attending somehow a little bit, because I think businesses are going to go out of business. I mean, restaurants are already running on very narrow, in making money, basically.
Yeah,
it's hard to get workers, hard to get anybody employed down there. I mean, though those restaurant styles are a little bit higher end, so I think you get the professional waiters and waitresses there, probably. Sure. So that's a little bit different, right. But at the same time, it's an odd timing where it's like, to your point, Norm, we have the police force. Why are we paying extra? Are we paying for a private security company to come in? No, it's the police. So why aren't we doing the job we're supposed to be doing? Getting horses out there, getting a ton of presence of just walking, which is in Columbus, literally on High Street. Just get cops walking the beat.
Yeah,
and
it's inexplicable to me in some ways. It seems like it's a slick vehicle to fleece people, and I think it's going to backfire. And I'll at least with local residents, and I'll give an example. When Columbus City Center, which was a downtown mall, now gone, there's just grass there where it used to be, but it was successful early on because guess what? The parking was free. And so the nice suburban ladies who made up the bulk of the retail shoppers in that mall, we're talking Jacobson's, we're talking Lazarus, we're talking Macy's, they were all there, all the big players, Sears and Roebuck. I mean, it was a gorgeous mall.
It was.
When that opened, that rivaled any mall I've ever been in. Yeah. And it was really a beautiful mall. And one of the ways you attract people is by giving them a financial incentive, not a disincentive, to come downtown. Yeah. Because what you're talking about is for the local population, which largely doesn't live downtown. There is a short north neighborhood where people do live. And, of course, there's German Village on the south side of downtown. And those are relatively close to this entertainment district. There's a brewery district also. So, at any rate, the bulk of the people who would come back downtown for a game or for dinner would be people, say, in Upper Arlington or Dublin or Worthington or Grove City or Groveport or whatever. They've gone home for the day, or they live out there and work out there, and then they make a decision, hey, honey, should we go downtown and do the gallery hop and have a big Chinese dinner right there in our favorite restaurant on the short North Strip? Yes, no. And if the perception is, well, if we go down there, we're going to get fleeced, the answer is going to be no.
Right.
And I think this is bad. This is bad PR. It's a bad strategy.
Yeah, I think so too. It's an interesting strategy for sure, where we have already talked about, and we've had experts in here, the police, talking about we can fix this problem. We just have to have more people on the street. It's not necessarily a money fix. It's just reallocating or just doing it a little bit differently. Yeah. Just tweaking it here or there because, and I get it, Short North does not want to continue this reputation that it's dangerous to be down there.
Right.
That's a hard one to wear off. Because,
and that is what killed City Center.
Right.
And that, there was a shooting.
Well, it killed Northland Mall.
It killed Northland.
That seems to be the death knell of malls, is when you start to get gang activity, being a rough area, area that no one wants to visit. The city of Whitehall, which is on the east side of Columbus, is still downplaying them being in the news weekly of some kind of shooting, but they have clawed themselves out of that. But it's that still people will not go there because of the reputation. It's in their heads and it's subconscious. Right. And I get Short North does not want that to be in people's heads for long and to fix things, but making it expensive to go down there, that's not going to help either, though.
No.
This is outside looking in, but it just seems like a disincentive. Like you said, it's like, why would I want to pay a little bit more, especially when I live here? It does seem to be more of a convention area where you kind of don't want to go because it's so busy anyway, parking and such. So, and it's great for that. I'm glad we have that area for conventions because that's a huge influx of money for Columbus. To have a convention center and to have those conventions come in. Oh my gosh, it's a huge boon for us to have those, and sporting events that goes on there. Whether it's in the convention center, like NCAA women's basketball, or the Arnold, whatever it might be. Fantastic. I'm glad we have that. Yep. But why are we having that problem on our backs? It just doesn't seem to be. That doesn't seem to make sense.
I would say to city management, look within your own policies, and change your policies. Many of which, as Brett just indicated, are not really tied to extra money, but tied to how you police and where you allocate the police resources. Instead of maybe doing things like traffic, which I understand brings in money, right? When you do a speeding ticket or a seatbelt, I get that. But maybe more urgently is protecting our neighborhoods. Yeah. And maybe assign the police more to that. And I'm no expert on policing, but there might be some things, and there ought to be some things that come way before you start larding more taxes on people who are already disinclined to come downtown, and now you just made it less attractive.
Yeah, exactly. No, and you had found the story about a state investigation. I don't know if I've heard anything about this. The PR investigation, state investigation.
Oh, what kind?
A state investigation. State of Ohio? Into I don't know. You brought it up earlier.
Oh, well, a couple of things.
Okay.
A couple of things.
I may have misstated it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's okay. So a couple of state items.
Okay.
We have around the state of Ohio, every state has these called regional planning commissions, and almost every geographical area of every state has some sort of commission that receives grant monies from both the state and the federal government, from like the Department of Transportation, et cetera. And sometimes they write grant requests, frankly, let's be honest, just for operational money. Like they're going to investigate something like a tram or, some kind of subway or something that they're pretty sure is not going to get funded, but let's do a study because we can maybe get a couple $1 million in the house, hire a couple of college kids and some professors, and then, make a little money for the Planning Commission. So what is going on in Ohio? People have never let this go. At one point, there was a public-private partnership being proposed for something called the 3C Railway, and it was going to connect Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland. There's currently a proposal of something that basically looks like an X, and it would be the 3Cs going from southwest to northeast, and then there would be something like an X that would connect Toledo and, say, Lima with, Parkersburg, West Virginia or something, so that you get basically service from the northwest down to the southeast part of the state. So at any rate,
does that X cross in Columbus?
Yes.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so
we're going to benefit from that if it were to happen. Okay. Yeah. Right.
That's just one of the proposed maps.
Right,
okay.
right.
It's not final.
Yeah.
So the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, which would cover the central 10 or 12 counties of Ohio, they did a question-answer discussion amongst the insiders this past week about a putative public railway project. And they're not calling it a bullet train or anything. And I just, I think it's a stillborn thing, especially under this administration, given the federal monies and state monies that have been spent in places like California, where they have the train to nowhere that basically runs from like Merced to Modesto. And they've built, I don't know, a few dozen miles of this thing. And basically, nobody can ride it. It ends in the middle of space with just, like a cutoff overhead. And so I think something around $2 billion has been spent on that. And nothing has, it's never going to reach fruition in our lifetime. And there doesn't seem to be in Ohio a demand for that. So they're studying it. I guess I would just, I don't know. I'm very skeptical that they believe it would ever happen. And it seems to me like a make work thing and getting people excited about, because they trains have their own built-in advocacy groups, and it gets them very excited. They think we're going to have a maglev system where the train floats magnetically above rails, or some other kind of Japanese or French bullet train technology. It's just not going to happen. There aren't that many Bengals fans that want to go to Cleveland or vice versa on a Sunday to make the economics of this make any sense.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting for sure. I don't, economically though, I don't think so either. I mean, for us, we are so car driven here in Ohio that for me to, if it existed, it would definitely have to cut off the time from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is. So let's say, for us to go to Columbus to Cleveland, basically over 2 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's
roughly.
Roughly.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that pain point okay if I can get there in an hour? I don't know.
Right.
Then once I get there, how do I go
Get
where
around.
I need to go? Go where I need to go.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know would be all answered with this. I get that, because then all of a sudden you get these hubs built up at point A to point B, and they take care of you to get going. But it's that mindset. Again, I'm older, than a 20-year-old that maybe is like, this is exciting. I would love it. I don't have a car. I would love to go to Cleveland more often. I'd love to go to Cincinnati more often. I would jump on this. I would do it. And they have a different lifestyle again. And it's not an old versus young. I didn't mean to position it that way, but it's that once you have your years in of independence of driving, you like it. Yeah. But I'm open to. I think it's an interesting idea, but it's like, but you got, again, it's a lot of money to investigate what it is that probably isn't really going to happen. We've been kicking this around forever.
Well,
forever,
here's the thing. Here's the thing.
Oh my gosh.
There were passenger rail services between all these cities in Columbus, including small towns. There was just to give an example, out in Licking County, for Granville and Alexandria and Johnstown, these little tiny, towns of, say, go back 100 years and say, 500 families, maybe lived in each of those three towns, 100 years ago. They had light rail. They had trolley service on rails from these cities into Columbus 100 years ago. And as Brett just mentioned, the automobile, right? Yeah. So trains put Ohio's canal system out of business. Okay. The automobile and later on buses put train service out of business in Ohio.
Right.
Why? Because when you get to your destination, if you're a salesperson or if you have kids at daycare
or vacationing
or you want to pick up a few sticks of lumber at Home Depot or Lowe's, you need your own vehicle, right?
Yeah.
And so it just, for multiple reasons, and not to mention privacy, maybe talking business or talking to your spouse on your phone while you're driving, not up to your ear, but hands-free, for God's sakes, right? Yeah. And or listening to your favorite music at any decibel level you choose.
So true.
I mean, there are a lot of reasons why people want their privacy. If this made sense, if there was enough demand for,
it would have been here already. You're right.
Amtrak, well, not Amtrak because that's public, but C&O or Baltimore and Ohio or some private, Warren Buffett, who owns all these trains, would jump in with both feet and say, "Oh, there's an untapped market here."
Yeah,
but guess what? They're not.
Yeah, it's not enough. Now the one. While we were talking about this, I was thinking about this. Okay, so why doesn't, and I understand why they're trying to connect the 3 Cs in Ohio. We're going to dive into this a little bit deep here for this, but it's easy to go up 71 if you're familiar with Ohio. So, but let's take the reverse. That's why, but they want to build it along 71 because you have that corridor, so you can build a train along there or whatever, electro train, whatever. Okay, so let's talk about a city that is hard to get to. It's not the straight line. Chicago. If you build something to Chicago, that might make some sense. Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. Because not that I don't know if we have a ton of business between Columbus and Chicago, but I would guess so.
I bet we do.
But it's not a straight line to Chicago.
Not at all.
If you could do it now, that would be 100 years in the making for all the rights and to get a straight line there. But Chicago makes sense if you think about it, or even if it's a Cleveland to Chicago kind of feel to it, may not be a straight line, but if you're saving now at that point, if it takes 6 hours probably, I don't know how long it takes from Columbus to Chicago, but if you shave off 3 hours of a 6 hour drive,
well, it would.
That's doable. That's doable.
There is a proposed I-73 between Chicago, basically Toledo, which would connect you to I-80, I-90, which takes you right to Chicago.
Yeah.
So I-73 has been proposed, and it would go basically from Toledo, Detroit area, all the way down to Myrtle Beach. and because there is no good way to get there.
That's true.
From Columbus.
Yeah.
There is not a diagonal highway that gets you into North or South Carolina really easily. Yeah. Because of the Appalachian Mountains chopping everything up.
Yeah.
I don't know. So there's a highway being proposed, and it's been proposed also for about 40 years.
Exactly. That's the thing. We want this immediately as like, folks, it's not going to be in our lifetimes. It just is not. I mean, it takes decades for this stuff, but it may be the future. Who knows? But at this point in time, it's one of those, why do we keep throwing money at that idea where maybe there's different ideas, and it could be talked about. I don't know, but it's one of those. Chicago, that makes sense.
Want to do a couple of quick hits here? Brett,
do it.
If you'll permit.
Let's do it.
The Columbus Dispatch came out today with an article. The Ohio Department of Education says 1 in 4 Ohio children in primary or secondary school are truant, and they define truancy as if you miss 10% of school days. They consider you to be chronically absent, i.e. truant. And they're trying to figure out why, what to do about it, et cetera. But I think hanging that out there, the exact number was 25.1% of Ohio's school children fall in that category, which is cataclysmic. I mean, for the future of the workforce here in Ohio.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can give you a resolution to that. You hold the parents accountable.
Well,
Sorry, parents,
but
it's kind of your obligation to get your kids to school.
But that just begs again. How do you do that?
I know. And that's going to be economical.
Right.
It's going to be, you're going to be fined.
Right. So,
I know. And that opens up a whole can of worms. I get it.
Which I think is fodder for discussion.
I think so, too.
Full. We'll get into this.
Yeah.
Maybe bring in somebody from the Department of Education.
Yeah, and see what it is.
A couple other things. In Canal, Winchester, there was a 3-year-old who fatally shot himself with a boyfriend's gun of the mother. And the only reason I bring that up is so I live with no minor children in my house. So there are no minor children. All of my guns are under lock and key, including from myself. Okay, because I'm concerned about a child visiting my house, right? Sure. My relatives or a neighbor kid. And, kids are clever, and this kid found this gun stuffed between a mattress and a wall. The mother says she put it there so that he would not find it, but he did find it. And so they need to go into a safe or a lockbox that only the parents and only the adults in the house have the code for. And I just, because obviously the mother obviously thought what she did was enough.
Sure.
And now she's charged with involuntary manslaughter of her 3-year-old. So just throwing that out there, that's a lesson for all of us. Yeah. And a third thing, and then I'm done with local news, but there was a franchise that had started to spread in central Ohio and elsewhere called Hot Chicken Takeover. And these restaurants were staffed by recently released ex-cons as their first job after being released from prison. And as you can imagine, having a felony on your head, on your resume, almost always will lead to a turn down. Like you're trying to get a job, and these are the people who we really do not want to have be recidivist and go back into prison. We want them to succeed. We want them to earn the American dream and to experience it. And it was kind of a miracle to go to one of these restaurants. I really like them. And I went there specifically to, do business with this franchise under the philosophy. And you could talk to the staff there, the cashier, the cooks, the people bussing tables, and you just say, hey, not to be nosy, if you're willing to talk about it, can you tell me, are you one of the people recently come out of prison and this is your job? And to a person, they say how much they loved working there. They were drug tested every week as part of their employment. They were not fired they were not immediately fired if they tested positive. They were then put into a rebound program by the employer. And so the local guy and the husband and wife team, I think, started this, were bought out by private equity. And it was the private equity company, I think about a year later now, said it's unsustainable and they closed it down, which is a real shame.
It is a shame. It is a shame, yeah. So, it seems to be the MO for private equities. They just squeeze the money out of it until it just dies. So hopefully somebody sees that model. Hopefully the previous owners can model this and showcase how to do this with other industries. That would be nice. Hopefully they're going out there teaching how this can be done and actually make money. Obviously you own a restaurant and you're doing this, you want to make money. Yeah. Because you got to pay your employees and you want to be able to live too. And all the while you're doing something really great.
Yeah, this was a fabulous idea. And I regret to see it gone. And I would just reach out, here on the electronic airwaves to other employees, whether you're landscaping or a restaurant or you're a roofer or whatever kind of manual labor kind of company you are, or maybe something you can train people to do in a office environment. it is inmates, after all, that I'm told do a lot of our airline reservations, which is pretty wild to think about. So there is a prison industry. It's when they get out, right? That's when they really need help.
Right. Exactly.
So,
exactly. And
please think about that.
And as Steve would say, a majority of them are probably just good people that made a mistake. They made a mistake, and they're still good-hearted, and they want to turn their lives around.
Yeah.
They screwed up. So, that sort of thing. Some goods, some bads.
Yeah, I'm going to throw away my loser of the week because I want to end on a really positive note. I know Brett and Steve would both like this, and I don't know did you see the speech given at the Charlie Kirk Memorial by his widow, Erica?
A little bit of it. I didn't watch most of it.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't a test. I mean, after all, it was 5 hours, folks. It was a hell of a show.
That was Gone with the Wind and more. Yeah, right. Exactly.
She did something which, I mean, to me, this was the high point, if you will, morally of the memorial service. So she just lost her husband at the time of her speech 11 days prior, okay? And she said, after building up to this, that her husband would want this and that her Lord and Savior Jesus did this when he was dying on the cross. Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So he's talking about the people who had decreed he had to die on the crucifix, right? She said in her remarks, through a wall of tears, that I forgive the young man who assassinated her husband, Charlie. So, look, I don't know. I'm a fallen person. I don't have that in me, but I'm going to try to be more like that.
Yeah,
I will aspire to having such forgiveness in my heart, and just say, what a incredible example, what an over the top example of true Christianity that she has displayed, and it continues to display in calling for. And she's not saying he shouldn't be tried and punished, but she is saying that she forgives him.
Right.
Which is unbelievable.
Yeah, especially 11 days after that's definitely some soul searching. And she's realizing too that helps her move on to the next stuff that needs to happen in her life as well too. Because I mean, my father was killed in an auto accident. It took me a couple of years to really forgive that woman. That it was not intentional, but obviously there's pain there. So it takes. I would suggest any pain, any forgiving you have to do. Respect the journey. It may not be 11, the week after. It may be years, but at least allow yourself to let it happen, because it is unburdening when you do. It just is. It is. But boy, allow the process to happen. I mean, I think it's really good to. And I love your point, Norman. It was I think reiterated a lot as well too. Is forgiven doesn't necessarily mean that forgives. It allows them to not be punished. That's totally different. It's totally the forgiven stuff is for you. Usually the recipient doesn't care, or maybe never hears. It's more for you, and then let the process happen of whatever happens outside of it. So no, I totally agree. That's pretty amazing that she can. I hope that that helps her, get where she needs to be, the next step, and really focus on their family.
And like I've said many times on the show, and I do mean this in a moral way, I do love everybody. And she said that in her speech, that love is always the answer. It's always the answer. Hate is never the answer. Love is always the answer to conflict. And if you can sit down and deal with your enemies, knowing in your heart that you love them as other human beings, even if you're at war with them, right? That there is a path forward if you can recognize the humanity in other people, despite the level of, agitation, upset, and even war between you. Because after all, who does the peace treaties? People that are at war with each other do peace treaties. We don't do peace treaties with, say, France. We do peace treaties with, Japan and Germany after World War II, right? So that is the nature of healing. It is between people that you have great conflict with. Not people you agree with. Right. That takes almost no effort.
Right. Exactly. And realize too, and we'll end the show with this as well too, is that, if you're giving that grace to that person across the table, they're giving you the same. So that's kind of a gift as well too, knowing, okay, you're accepting me as a human,
or at least you're calling them to do that.
Yeah.
If they can't or won't. Okay, you tried.
You tried. I mean, we've been trying to exemplify that here at the Roundtable at Common Sense Ohio for, years now, that just we disagree on some things, but it's okay. Yeah. We're here for discussion to bring up different things, and we learn from each other. So allow that to happen.
After Jesus said, Lord God, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It wasn't like the Pharisees all came out of the temple and said, gee whiz, thanks for forgiving us, and we're really sorry about this. Take him down off that cross. Yeah. Let's heal him up. Yeah. No, that's not what happened.
No.
It doesn't always, you're not always going to get a loving response.
Right,
you do it anyway.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
Right. Exactly. Well, hopefully that left you with a good feeling and marching forward what to think about today. Exactly. So thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week. Probably 3 of us, let's hope.
Yes.
If not, you'll have 2 for Common Sense Ohio. Have a good week.